What is up, everyone? It's Horror Master, and I'm back with yet another rank 'em all. And you can tell by the shirt that I'm wearing, of course, I am honestly doing it. One of the big four of thrash metal, one of the most influential thrash metal bands of all time, one of the most important bands in terms of extreme metal. I'm talking about the one, the only Slayer! Of course, if you don't know who Slayer is, what the hell are you doing here? But for those who might not know who Slayer is, Slayer was formed in 1981, but of course, guitarist Jeff Hanneman, guitarist Kerry King, drummer Dave Lombardo, and bassist Tom Araya. And the thing about Slayer that a lot of people fucking enjoy is that they're one of the most, like I said, one of the most important bands in the development of metal, thrash metal, or even the progression of even extreme metal. Because compared from the big four, out of the big four being Metallica, Anthrax, and the Megadeth, and the rest of the big four, Slayer was one of the bands that stood out the most, being that, of course, from their album covers to their lyrics, it kind of went more anti-religious, even though Tom Araya has stated in so many interviews that he is a born Catholic and is not bashing against the people who, not worship, but, preach the Catholics about mostly the system behind the church and that, which, bands like Behemoth, have done in the past. Even bands like Watain have done it over the past couple of years. But Slayer is one of the most important metal bands in the history of metal. Without them, we wouldn't have subgenres like death metal. We don't have subgenres even like close to black and death metal. Even going down the line like grindcore, brutal death metal, you name it. Without Slayer, the majority of extreme metal bands wouldn't be here without them today. So this is probably the biggest discography I have done so far, because we're talking about 12 studio albums and one EP. And of course, I did include this EP because I think, which I'll get to when I mention the EP, it's important to the history of the development of the sound of the band. And this is probably the first band out of my entire rank of malls that there's some albums I do not like from Slayer. Even though, like I said, Slayer, important to the genre, but there's some albums I just cannot, for the life of me, cannot stand. But enough jibber jabber, let's get into the rock and roll. So at number 13, at the bottom of the barrel, we of course have Diablos and Musica. Now, if you all have watched me in the Horseman podcast, I've explained how much I don't like this album. I mean, I will give the band credit for trying to, I guess, branch out into a new sound. Of course, this was during the time that new metal was big at the time. Of course, bands like Korn, Limp Bizkit, or even a Deftones, or even a System of a Down, even though I consider System of a Down or even Deftones kind of new metal, but they're kind of, in that spectrum. So the band was like, then this was 1990, 1998, around there, so they had to find a new sound. And of course this happened, and it has become it is the worst Slayer album of all time. The two things, actually three things, I will give Diablos and Musica credit for. One is the album cover, because it reminds me a bit of Pinhead from Hellraiser, just a tiny bit. And of course the two songs that stand out the most, which are Bitter Peace and I can't remember the other one. Bitter Peace and State of Mind. Those are the only songs that are worth listening for this album. This is probably one of those albums I will never ever buy on CD, because again, I'm not. There's gotta be somebody out there, and let me know in the comments, who adores Diablos and Musica. If you are somebody who loves Diablos and Musica to death, let me know what you like about it. I'm really, really curious about it. So at number 12, at number 2, we have Undisputed Attitude. Now, this album should have never, ever, ever been an album. The reason I say that is because the majority of the songs, 99.9% of the songs, are just covers. Now, I'm not saying it's bad for you to, get inspired from your bands, of course, bands like Venom and all that, but to have the majority of the album just like covers, which is not really. I mean, it would have been like maybe a cool EP, or maybe something like what Metallica did in the Garage Thing, something not really quote unquote in the Slayer discography. But the only song that's original from this album, of course, is the last song, with Gemini. But again, even that song is a bit hard to taste. But again, Undisputed Attitude should have never been a full length album. I still, if there was like a side project, it would have been better. But then again, not my favorite Slayer album. So at number 11, we have Divine Intervention. So after the success of Seasons in the Abyss, of course, one of the biggest albums that they ever made. Of course, the band began touring and starting to plan for, of course, their next album cycle. So this took around 4 years in between the gap. In between those 4 years, Dave Lombardo leaves the band for, I guess, the second time in the band's history, and of course they get Paul Bostav, which was later in bands like I think he was in, of course, in Forbidden, Exodus, and Testament, and so on and so forth. But again, it's kind of hard to go from Season to Abyss to Divine Intervention, being that this album, even though the album cover is badass, it has some good songs. Of course, one of those songs has to be Sex, Murder, Art, Serenity and Murder. Those songs are kind of cool, but whenever I'm in the mood for Slayer, again, this is not one of the albums I would not, go after when I'm in the Slayer mood. At number 10, we of course have World Painted Blood. Now this unfortunately would be the last album that Jeff will be in the band, of course, because later on he passed away in 2012, 2013. And I mean, a bit better than Divine Intervention, but not really my favorite. I think the album, I mean, it's 40 minutes in length, which, most of the Slayer albums are around maybe 40 to maybe even 35 minutes in length, but it has some okay tracks. I mean, the title track's okay, Human Strain is okay, Playing with Dolls is okay, but to me, it just didn't feel like Slayer. Like I said, some of these albums, the bottom of the barrel albums, don't really feel the Slayer, don't have the Slayer feel to it. In my opinion, I don't know, for some reason, maybe it's just me, or maybe my hearing is all that, but to me, World Painted Blood is not one of those albums that I mentioned before I wouldn't go to listen to. I only did this for this ranking, which, for this ranking, listening to this album, say maybe appreciate some of those albums I haven't listened to in a while, and I'd rediscover why I didn't listen to some of the albums that I mentioned right now. So, at number 9, we of course have Repentless. Now this would be the last album that Slayer would ever release. Of course, they will bring back Paul Bostach to be on drums, and they will bring Gary Holt, formerly of Exodus, to fill into Jeff's, big shoes. Which, having Gary in the band, at first I was like, this is gonna be a really, really, really good album. And this album just gets a lot of hate for some reason. I mean, I like the album. Of course, it's not like something like A Raining Blood or Show No Mercy, but it has some cool songs. I mean, when you have this title track, Cast of vs. Stone, When the Stillness Comes, You Against You, I think these are really, really, really good songs. Like I said, better than something like Diablos and Musica or World Painted Blood, in my opinion. And it's one of those albums that I rarely go when I want to listen to Slayer. I mean, even the album cover, I think the album cover is a really awesome album cover, in my opinion, because you can see the face kind of reminds you a bit of Jesus Christ, if something around that. But regardless, it's not. It's a bit of a letdown because the last Slayer album, I wish it could have gone with a bigger bang, but again, not the way I wanted the band to go, but I'll take that any day of the week. Now, here's where things are gonna get really good. So now we're gonna get into some of the more better albums in my opinion. So from here on out, these are the albums that you need to listen to like right now. And like I said, if you're like one of those completionists that wants to listen to an entire discography, add your own will. But to me, from number 8 to number 1 are the Slayer albums that to me are worth listening to. So at number 8, blip, we of course have Christ Illusion. Now Christ Illusion was released around 2006, so this was after I think a 5-year gap between God Hates Us All and this album. And this was one of the first albums that kind of brought that old feeling of Slayer, like the early albums. Of course, them going to a drop B in one of the in songs like Black and Serenade, or even Cult to go to C tuning was really interesting at the time, even though when they did Diablos, they went, I think they went D tuning or C tuning. I don't remember. Like I said, that album just. But with Christ Illusion, the thing I really, the one song that Christ Illusion to me is the outstanding song is Jihad. If you listen to that song and that ending chant, which Tom Araya has said, that was a one take chant, which, same thing with Angel of Death when he did the infamous scream. Sometimes the one takes are just there, and you're in the moment, you just do it, and when you try to do it again, it didn't capture that magic, that feeling of just anger and all that. But not only that, but once you go deep into the album, songs like Skeleton Christ, Flesh Storm, Cult, Supremus. I mean, it's a really, really good album. Like I said, from here on out, all of these albums that I'm talking about, highly, highly recommend. So, like I said, one of the first ones, Christ Illusion. At number 7, we have the album that came up before Christ Illusion. And of course, I am talking about God Hates Us All. Now, the copy that I have is the original album cover. I'm going to probably put the alternative album cover somewhere around here, so y'all can kind of compare why. So, the story about the album cover is that this was released, unfortunately, on November 11, 2001. September 11, 2001. This was in the 9/11 attacks. So, that plus the album cover having the bloody, bloody Bible. Of course, a lot of people, like stores like Walmart and Target, weren't gonna sell kind of album like this, which I find it hypocrite when you have something like freaking Nicki Minaj have a weird album cover, or even sexist album cover, and this can be sold in stores. I think that's kind of hypocrite, but regardless, this was the first Slayer album I actually bought on CD. I remember going to my local second in Charles, going through the shelves and just trying to see what I can find, and this little thing popped up. And a lot of people hate on this album. I don't understand why. I think it's one of the most, not really most, but one of the most underrated Slayer albums that Slayer has ever released. I mean, the song Disciple, that alone, that chorus, the God hates us all, God hates us all. Oh my God, it gets you pumping. But Here Comes the Pain is a good song, Warzone's a good song, Exile's a good song, Payback's a good song, New Faith's a good song. Everything about this album is good. And it's a shame that a lot of people don't give it the respect that it deserves. To me, God Hates Us All, it's a really good album. So if you're trying to get into some Slayer, more underrated Slayer, God Hates Us All is your album to be. At number 6, we of course have South of Heaven. Now, it was really hard to put this one very low. And South of Heaven, one of the most influential albums in the series discography. So South of Heaven is a bit of a weird album. Not saying that it's bad. It's really good. But this is between Raining Blood and Seasons the Abyss. So by this time, South of Heaven, the sound of it, I mean, it was a bit more progressiveness, more melodic to some point, more at times even doing. Of course, it was still fast. It still had the typical Slayer sound, fast, but again a bit more calmed down. This is where I guess the band began to be more creative in their instruments, more, not, I don't want to say technical, but more they began to guess experiment with the fret and all that. I mean, of course, when you start the album with "Stops of Heaven," one of the like top 5, top 7 Slayer songs of all time. As you're going down, of course, Mandatory Suicide, Goes to War, Spill the Blood. The one thing that I will, the one thing that I will say about "Stops of Heaven" that I don't like is the Descendant Aggressor cover by Judas Priest. I love the original song by Judas Priest, but this one did not live up to what I think if this song wasn't in the album, I think this album would have been perfection more, even though it's already perfect. If you take that song out of the list, it would have been even better. But again, such an amazing album. So at number 6, Sounds of Heaven. Now we're getting into the top 5. So at number 5, we have the eponymous debut, Show No Mercy. Now, a lot of people have called this a proto-Slayer, and for a long time, I didn't understand why a lot of people call this a proto-Slayer album. After re-listening to this album in the past couple of days, maybe in a couple of weeks, I understand why they call it a pre-Slayer album. This was a more on traditional thrash metal album, something to the level of probably like a Kill 'Em All or the first Killing My Business or even Fistful of Metal, more grounded, more traditional thrash metal. Of course, Kerry King and the band have stated that they got so many influence from Venom, Merciful Fate, Diamond Head, Iron Maiden, and so on and so forth. Mostly the Noir bands, you can hear it in this album, especially songs like Tormentor, Black Magic, the title track, The Antichrist. My God, it's probably one of my favorite Slayer songs of all time. And again, probably one of the best debuts in a while that they have ever released. And of course, I'm not saying it's better than something like Kill 'Em All or something like Shown or something like Killing My Business or Fistful of Metal. But like I said, a proto Slayer. This was before they were still trying to find themselves in the sound. So, can you imagine if Slayer would have kept this sound into their later albums? What a world it would have been differently. At number 4, we have the Haunting in the Chapel EP. Now, this is where Slayer were beginning to sound like Slayer. Of course, everyone knows the typical Slayer sound. By this time, this is where they were really, really beginning to, find their roots, their sound as they would later go on. Of course, when you have a song like Chemical Warfare, that song alone is worth this EP. Just listen to that song and tell me you don't want to fucking headbang your head. Of course, even Capture of Sin, or even the title track, they're still good. Yes, of course, I've heard the arguments that this album is not album, EP. This EP is only 13 minutes in length, and a lot of people have it a bit lower in the list. I've seen some people have it in the top 10, which, I do respect their opinions, but to me, this EP is probably next to something like, what's the other EP? In the Sign of Evil by Sodom, probably one of the most important EPs in metal. Especially this EP began to show the development of the sound of Slayer that will later define Slayer's career. At number 3, we have the album that follows the Haunted Chapel EP. And of course, I am talking about Hell Awaits. Now, this is where Slayer have found their sound and have been going strong ever since, this album. When you start an album with your title track, and for years, I thought the beginning chant, it said, Sacred Heart, Sacred Heart, Sacred Heart, Sacred Heart. I didn't know that it was played backwards. I was saying, join us, join us, join us. And that riff, my God, probably one of the most underrated riff masters ever. And my God, it's so fucking good. So fucking good. My God, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. But you go more to the album. You go Praise of Dead, Necrophobic, which will later inspire the band Necrophobic. At Dawn They Sleep, Hardening of the Altaries, which they end with the same riff from Hell Awaits. So it's kind of like, they kind of connected again, which Slayer really don't do that much. But this album has inspired so many bands. This was released in 1985, so this was almost around the peak of thrash metal. Not yet. We were still 1 year away from the peak of thrash metal, but my God, it was just there. Fucking brutality at its finest. At number 2, we have Citizens in the Abyss. Of course, probably one of the most beloved albums in their discography, and one of the most, next to probably something like Rain in Blood, which we'll talk about in a bit, is probably one of the most influential albums in their discography. But at this time, Slayer kind of went a bit more slower. You know, when you have the title track, the end of the album, a bit more slower pace, more doomy at times. You know, it kind of went to show that Slayer were beginning to, like I mentioned before, in an album like, what was the album that I mentioned? I don't remember the album, but this was a bit more slower. Something a bit doomy, bit of crossover thrash. Well, not really crossover thrash, but this was 1990. This was during the peak of, not really one of the peaks, but when the beginning of a grunge metal will ever go on. But this album is probably one of the most influential. I mean, when you have a song like Dead Skin Mask, a song that was written about Ed Gein, and a song that my buddy Levi, aka Thrash Maniac 99, have said that Cannibal Corpse should play this song. I 100% agree that Cannibal Corpse should play this song and it will fit perfectly. But you go into the album, War Assemble, Hollow Painted, Temptation, Skeleton of Society, Bond of Fire. It was really hard to put number 2, but for good reasons, it's probably next to neck and neck with Rain in Blood. And of course, number 1, and I mentioned this album the whole fucking time. I'm talking about the one, the only, Rain in Blood. When you start off an album with Angel of Death, that's it. That's all alone. That's it. That's all you need. Angel of Death. That infamous scream that I've mentioned before. It feels like someone's punching Tom Araya in the nuts and giving that infamous scream, which was done in one take, which is kind of hard for a metal musician or even any kind of musician to do something so iconic in one take. And my God, it's so heavy, demonic, evil, fast, brutal. And this is the album that is to thank and blame for the development of death metal, brutal death metal, grindcore, basically a lot of extreme metal. This was one of the few albums next to something like Venom, Welcome to Hell, or Passeries Under Son of the Black Mark that helped develop the development of extreme metal. You go deeper into the album, Piece by Piece, Altars of Sacrifice, Jesus Saves, Criminally Insane, Reborn, Epidemic, Postmortem, Raining Blood. If there's one thing this album does well, both the opener and closer are probably one of the best albums to ever done. Something compared to something like maybe, the Satanists when they started with Blow Your Trumpets Get Real, and then with Oh Father Satan No Son, or something like Back in Black where they start with Hell's Bells, and then when Rock and Roll and Noise Pollution. This is up there. And like I said, not only is this one of the most important albums in the development of extreme metal, one of the most important albums in the development of thrash metal, but one of the most important albums in metal in general. And this next to something like Master of Puppets, Among the Living, and Rust in Peace, the big 4, probably biggest thrash metal albums of all time. And for that reason, Rain in Blood is my number 1 Slayer album of all time. And that does it for this video. I hope you guys really enjoy this rank 'em all. This rank 'em all took me more time than expected. Like I said, we're talking about 12 albums and 1 EP, so it's a really big undertaking, especially when you have to listen to those god-awful albums. So again, I hope you guys really enjoy this rank 'em all. I'm going to bring you on more rank 'em alls hopefully in the future. Let me know what other rank 'em alls you want me to do. You want me something, something like Immolation or AC/DC, or, I'm open for any rank 'em all, because if you all have seen my previous rank 'em alls, I kind of go in all the spectrums of rock or metal. Like, I could later want to do something like maybe Nirvana, or probably something like maybe Owada, or hell, even the Beatles, or, something just unique and weird and odd, because like I said, I like to go between rock and metal and just talk about those bands and the bands that I love. And like I said, hope you guys are really enjoying the Ranking Monster. I have a lot of fun doing these, and it makes me appreciate more of the bands and makes me want to get more of some of these albums into my collection. Which, follow me on Instagram and Twitter so y'all can see how the development of my collection is going. I hopefully I can bring you on a CD collection update because I'm gonna eventually gonna go out of town a couple of days and probably snatch some stuff. Probably spend more money than I should in some record shops. And just maybe you guys want to do maybe another rank 'em all, maybe on my favorite comic book movies or some horror thing. I still want to bring you something more horror theme as well. Lately I've been more focused on the metal stuff, which it's one of my main bread and butter, but horror is neck and neck with there. I also want to bring you all some reviews. I'm still trying to find the right album I want to bring you all to see to review because it's kind of hard. I mean, there's some albums that I've listened which are really good, but it's just depending of the time and all that. And like I said, I hope you guys are enjoying the Ranking Monster. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do all the little fun things. Like I said, follow me on my Instagram, follow me on my Twitter so you can be updated with myself and the things I do outside in a regular basis. And like I said, hope you guys are enjoying the videos and hope you guys stay along for the ride. And until then, stay metal.